This is the Guns Magazine podcast, quick hit episode number 34. Hi there, and welcome to another quick hit episode of the Guns Magazine podcast. I'm your host and the editor of Guns Magazine, Brent T. Thanks for joining us as we talk to the interesting people who make up the world of shooting, hunting, and the firearms industry. Today's episode is another gathering of our resident guncranks, myself, publisher Roy Huntington, and American Handgunner editor Tom McHale, as we discuss one of the most controversial topics among handgun shooters, that being lasers. Before we get started, I'd like to remind you this episode of the Guns Magazine podcast is sponsored by our friends at Kimber. Kimber was founded with the singular purpose of making every firearm the best it can possibly be, with a fit and finish that only practiced hands can achieve and appreciate. Whether you carry a Kimber for personal protection, hunting, or competition, know that their promise of quality without compromise is how they measure success. To learn more about Kimber firearms, visit kimberamerica.com. You know, putting a laser device on handguns is really a contentious topic among shooters. Depending on your viewpoint, many people believe they are either the greatest things since John Wayne movies or a guaranteed trip to the morgue for you, your family, everyone you've ever met, and hundreds of innocent bystanders. Internet forum arguments aside, you'll probably find the truth lies somewhere in the middle. Now here's our Guns Magazine podcast quick hit episode on handgun lasers. Our topic is, will lasers get you killed? Or are they the greatest thing since sliced bread? And when I got online, I was doing a little research just to kind of get up to speed. Oh my goodness. And I have to say, Tom McHale was some of those conversations. So Tom's got good, strong opinions, but I think we generally are all on the same boat here. As Tom has often said, gun owners, shooters tend to be binary, that something's either the greatest thing ever or the worst thing ever. And fortunately, we've had enough experience to realize a laser is neither. There are applications that it works really good for. There are some applications that people say it's great, and that's not necessarily the truth in the real world. So your mileage may vary. Your results may vary. It won't get you killed, and it won't save the day in every circumstance. So having given my lead in, Tom, what's your take overall on the laser?
I am a big fan of lasers, but you know what the best feature of a laser is? You know, if you're going to evaluate whether it's useful or not, the very first thing you should look at, think about the context. Like if we consider context of concealed carry, self-defense, home defense, that is a whole different world than the context of sneaking down a dark street in Fallujah, attacking a terrorist den and kicking down doors, right? But strangely, like you mentioned, you saw some of the debates online, and that's exactly what happens. People say, oh, lasers are the dumbest thing ever because they can see you coming. It's like, well, if that's your home defense scenario, sneaking down a dark street, getting ready to kick down a door and take on 10 armed terrorists, your home defense scenario is really dumb, right? And not at all realistic. So I think you got to look at context, you know, and I think the mission of a laser is really, really simple. In a fast-moving confrontation in low light or dark conditions, it gives you another option to help you get shots on target faster. I mean, it kind of really boils down to that, right? You know, you got to look at it for what it is, and I think it's an incremental tool that gives you options.
Yeah,
use it, don't use it, whatever.
Now, I'll weigh in on kind of the opposite side for me, and I've used them operationally. They're slower to me, because I find myself watching the dot rather than watching the area. And I'll leave it at that, because that, again, that's an individual thing. For me personally, they're slower. But one thing I do want to say when I was reading a lot of these comments was this, when it's really, really dark, the laser helps you hit the target. You're correct. However, I want to point out, again, based on my experience as a law enforcement officer, if you're shooting at shapes, that's a very bad thing. Yeah. There's lots of reasons why people may be in your house that you didn't invite. I can think of dozens of times, I'm sure Roy can too, where a drunk neighbor accidentally walked into a house. Yeah, you might be legally justified in shooting, maybe, but morally, are you? And I've talked, I think, on one of our previous gun cranks where I started to point a gun at my son outside. And he's smart enough to know better, but it was one of those situations. Thank God I did the right thing. I had a bright white light on my shotgun, and oh, look, it's a member of my family. So I think when we talk about low light, I want to take that out of the equation, or at least I do, because I think you need to identify your target regardless of your mission.
I would absolutely agree with that, but I want to put low light right back into the equation. And let's talk about context. What is low light? Okay, I see people testing lasers on the range, outdoor in the sun. Not where they're going to help you. They're going to be 94 times slower in that environment than iron sights or anything else. Pitch dark, you're absolutely right. You don't want to be shooting at shapes. But I think people might be amazed at how visible a laser is in anything in between. I mean, and I'm talking even a house inside a building or house in daylight. Just the shadows from inside. It's a bright thing, right? So there's a lot of room in that definition of low light, I think.
Well, for the first time ever, we've completely shut Roy out. Roy, your experiences with lasers.
I've been listening to you guys dig your own holes there. So, no, everything you say makes perfect sense. I think it's important that we have a little context, and that I first met Lou Danielson, who was the founder of Crimson Trace, in 1994. At the Dallas SHOT Show there. And I was downstairs and walking along, looking at the little 6-foot tables where the new companies are. And I saw a little red dancing dot, which at the time, that was kind of unusual, 1994 in the industry. And so I looked up and I saw Lou and Clyde Caceres and another gentleman there. And they were all looking at me really anxious, like, would you please come and talk to us, please? And what they had was their tool room prototype sample of the Crimson Trace's first laser grip, which went on the Ruger standard auto pistol. Well, I was taken by it. I was impressed by the people. I was impressed by the technology. I immediately saw all kinds of uses for this, but it was more as a training, hey, let's go shoot jackrabbits at dusk, kind of a thing. And so I got to know them. I wrote up the first articles about their products in those days, and I was absolutely slammed by my peers in the industry. You're an idiot. You're going to get everybody killed. We're all going to die. The world's going to end. But I stayed the course because I really saw some advantages of a lot of things you guys are talking about. And so, of course, as the years went by, we saw the converts, people who at the time were very against lasers for all those silly reasons. It'll show your location and, what if it fails? So what if it fails? I use your sights anyway, right? And so all these diehard anti-laser peoples have, for the most part, come around and realize that, no, actually, there are really good tools. Let me tell you a couple quick things. I used to write in the police magazines, and Brent used to do it for SWAT. Tom, I know you do it in different locations too. And that is, we all need this bag of tricks and tools, and that when you're encountered a situation, this one might be bring out your pocket knife and cut the rope. This one might be run away. This one might be use less lethal. And then another tool in that bag is the laser. And one of the reasons that I really like them is because it's two things. Number one time I was on the range in Texas, and it was one of those 115-degree days, and we were shooting from the ground up at the target. Well, I had so much sweat in my eyes, I couldn't see anything. And I happened to notice that a guy next to me had our laser. And even though it was daytime, we were like 8 yards away from the target. He had his laser on the target, and he was just eating the center out of the target. And it was all I could do to just see, and that I really went, if I'm on the ground and I'm injured and I got blood in my eyes, that could give you the opportunity to be able to see what you're doing. And then the other thing I use it for teaching is that you teach trigger control. Because a lot of people say, oh, look at that dancing laser, that you're going to miss the target. It's like, no, actually, it's a really good way to teach people how to control their trigger. So that's, that's my preliminary experience.
Can we stop on that for a second? Yeah. I mean, I think you just hit on one of the biggest myths, is that it's a substitute for poor training and technique. And that is a load of bunk.
It can be.
This doesn't make you shoot any better because of what you just said. If you're trigger control is sucky. You're going to shoot sucky with a laser or without one, right?
Well, I think that, but you just said an important thing is a lot of people, and I see gun stores sell them like that. Crimson Trace historically had these little displays, and you could go up and hold one of the grip lasers, on the display and see and I've heard these gun store commandos say, well, if you have that, then, you'll be able to do anything.
Right.
And we all know that that's not the case. And I think you're right. People who have never trained in their life buy a laser, screw it on the gun, don't even zero it, and think, okay, I'm good to go.
Yeah, exactly. And you raised another interesting point, Roy, and I'll relate my experience knowing a lot of, I'd call them the top trainers in the country. An interesting thing is most of them carry a backup pistol. And most of those backup pistols are small revolvers, and a lot of them have lasers. They don't carry lasers on their primary gun, but they do on the backup with the idea, if you have to draw that, things have gone really badly. And it may be a situation where you're injured, you're on the ground, something has really, really gone wrong. And definitely a laser gives you an advantage. If you're in such a bad way you can't get the pistol to your eye, maybe you're been shot in both arms or something like that, at least a laser gives you another option for sighting in your gun. So I totally agree. That makes a lot of sense in that kind of scenario.
Well, there is a shooting, and I can't recall the specifics right now, but essentially it was an officer who was down, who was injured badly. He was able to transition to his backup gun with his weak hand, but he was on the ground, blood in his eyes kind of a thing, and he was not able to bring the gun up to index it, but he was able to grip it, use the laser sight, put the dot on the bad guy, pull the trigger, and put the bad guy down. Yeah. And so, could he just shoot around or something eventually? But that was a confirmed case where a laser really helped. But it was another tool, it was basically all it is. I will say, and we talked a little bit about this beforehand, is that I once cleared a room. I had been training with lasers and whatnot. And I was clearing this room, and it dawned on me that I was watching the red dot.
Yeah.
I wasn't seeing the room. I wasn't using my peripheral vision and seeing the room in it. And I kind of panicked for a second. And I realized that I needed to rethink some of my training there. So that's not to say that lasers are a bad thing, but you have to be aware of all of the possibilities there.
Brent, I think you hit on something, a key word a minute ago, and I think you might have been the word option. And that's kind of my big thing is I think that gives you an option without taking away anything, because the iron sights are still there, or an optic, if that's what you prefer, knock yourself out. But if you draw this in the daytime and look for a sight picture, you're going to see the sights. If it's low light or inside or slightly darker conditions, you may see the laser first. There's no conscious decision involved in that. You got choices, Well,
look at this ready acceptance of red dot sights. And I'll be honest with you, I think my experiences with lasers tempered my initial acceptance of red dot sights. Because I thought, well, great, it's just going to be distracting. You're going to be looking for the red dot rather than concentrating on solving your problem. But for some reason, that seems to be okay in the community. People say, oh, red dots, oh, yeah, they're really good. Well, we were talking a little bit about how do you find a red dot. Tom, you had a really good advice, which is just don't look for it, and it'll appear. But if the red dot doesn't come on, or if you can't find it, everyone seems to assume you'll transition to some kind of indexed shooting or use your iron sights or something like that. Well, the same thing applies to lasers.
Yeah.
Is all. That's all. Like people say, oh, yeah, what if the laser doesn't come on? Then there's about an eighth of a second transition where you go back to your iron sights,
Yep. I always ask people what if the lights don't go on in your house because you forgot to pay the electric bill? It's like, we're big kids. We can pay the bill when it's due, and we can also change the batteries once a year, right?
And another old chestnut that is thrown out with lasers is this: give away your position. If it's really dusty or smoky, yes, absolutely will. But there's one thing that people don't ever talk about that I've actually found in operations that's a problem with them is if you get two people, and I realize I'm talking a SWAT situation, but what if you've got a husband and wife defending their bedroom and they both got lasers? It's really easy to confuse who's pointing. So in a situation like that, a red and green laser would probably be a better option, but it's just something to think about, that I don't worry about them riding the beam back to me. If it's that smoky, I may be looking for a fire extinguisher rather than my pistol, but so I don't think that's a big deal. But the whole idea of, if there's multiple good guys with lasers, something to think about, that, okay, is that my dot? And you'll eventually figure it out, but it's one more thing you got to figure out in the midst of a confrontation. So
let me ask you guys a question. Two former LEOs, right? So I hear that and I say offense versus defense, different things. I believe, just based on reports, the overwhelming majority of, say, home invasion type situations are fast, violent, and extremely reactive. We're not talking a Hollywood movie where you got two groups of people sneaking around a house trying to find each other in the dark and start a gunfight, right? I feel like it's more, holy crap, there's a guy standing 5 feet in front of me with a gun in the middle of the night. Right?
Well, it's kind of two, though. It's because I responded to, I don't know, hundreds of, we thought we saw a prowler. I heard a bump in the garage. And so there's a lot of bump in the night, get your gun, close the door. There's a lot of that. But you're right. Other than that, it's usually you wake up and you realize that the fight is really actually already on. And
at which point the mission is to get shots on target fast. Not there. I just don't see a lot of realistic home scenarios where we're sneaking around leisurely,
No. You shouldn't be
covering the place, right?
Yeah, laser or not.
You know how they're going to find my position? They're not going to follow the laser back to me. They're going to know where I am because they're going to hear, "Get the hell out of my house. I've called 911." Right?
It is.
There's my position.
There's another situation that we haven't talked about. We talk about quite a bit, though, in both of our publications. Our readership, our audience, tends to be a little bit more experienced, and they're having difficulty in manipulating pistols. They're probably having some difficulty with eyesights. I, for example, have very large front sights, a particular brand. But lasers can work good if someone's having eyesight difficulties. It obviously might be a little faster for them than trying to line up iron sights that they're having trouble seeing.
And you know what? That may be a situation where learning to rely on your laser sight as your primary aiming tool is very appropriate. I agree with you completely. If your father is 89 years old and lives by himself or something, and he can't see very well anymore, he see well enough to identify that this is a bad guy in my house. But that's a case where maybe buy them a bright green laser and teach them what it means, and gives them some self-confidence there. So, I just, it's like anything, because we answer these questions to readers all the time. They say, what gun should I buy for home defense? What's the perfect bullet? What's the perfect red dot sight? There isn't any answer to any of this kind of stuff. It's all how it appeals to you. And I think the lasers just need to be part of that. And when we're done here, I think if we can make everybody understand that if you buy a laser, that's not putting a period on all of your needs.
Yeah.
Good point.
Wow. I think we all agree on that.
Wow.
Yeah. Well, but I think that's important. That means something, though. It means that we all, with our very diverse experience and background, we all come to the same conclusion, which is it's a remarkably versatile tool. I look upon it in my own life as primarily a training tool right now. I have a gun here. I have a Ruger 22 pistol with a Crimson Trace laser grip on it, and I use it to teach trigger control to people.
Yeah.
And when they see that little bead, the red dot dancing around on the target, and then I make them learn how to squeeze slowly so it doesn't dance around as much. Well, you can just see there, they go, "Oh, I understand. I get it now." And then, it's a very powerful tool, and I think that would apply to anybody with a laser on their gun. The next time you go to the range, put the target out at 7 yards and try to have the laser hold very still as you press the trigger. Oh.
Hey, and if you really want to focus training, I like to do that. Even take the sights out of the equation. Just like remove all the variables. Don't bring the gun all the way up to your eyeball. Just hold it in a comfortable position and focus exclusively on this.
Yeah.
Rather than the brain trying to figure, okay, sights, this, trigger, blah, 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 10 different things.
Yeah.
Hold the gun still and press the trigger, and great training aid.
Yep. It's almost like ultimate dry fire practice, if you ask me. And then also, what's the name of that electronic gizmo thing?
The Mantis X.
Yeah, the Mantis. My gosh, in combination with something like that, I think people could actually really do some serious trigger control work at home. I mean, I think that's important. I also have people ask me, how do you sight it in? And so other than the mechanics of just read your instruction manual, there's usually a couple of little Allen, contacts that you move the dot up and down. I tend to sight mine in with the red dot basically sitting on top of the front sight. But people forget that it won't be there the same at any distance. So at 3 yards, depending on the way the laser is mounted, it may be down and to the right, if it's a grip laser. And then when you reach out at maybe 8 yards where you have it zeroed, it'll be perfect. But if you move back farther now, that laser is still going to aim up in a slightly different direction. Because I know we've had readers panic. They say, I sighted my laser in, and then when I went to 10 yards, now it's not sighted in anymore.
But it's only we're talking an inch, right?
Yeah.
I used to get all worked up about that too. Like, oh my gosh, do I do parallel sighting the laser and the and they'll be off an inch everywhere, or if you do that, it's really like a half an inch. Like. Yep. Then I realized I was being ridiculous, and
well, I think
I put it on the front sight and forget about it.
Well, and look at the average group you shoot. Like if you normally shoot about a 6-inch group at 8 yards or something, well then don't be real concerned about the fact your laser's a half-inch off.
Yeah.
Yep. Well, I was looking at this list of stuff that I got off the internet, and I got to tell one quick story. The psychological effect on bad guys. I strongly discount psychological effect on anything. Racking the shotgun. I mean, if it works, great, you're money ahead, but I never count on that as part of my tactical, ensemble. But there was one time we were moving prisoners from our old jail to, we just built a brand new multi-million-dollar facility. So they were moving them on school buses. So they pretty much called every cop in the tri-state region, and we formed this phalanx of armed, we were armed to the teeth, and we chained all the detainees together and moved them in shifts. And, we were watching both out to make sure somebody didn't try to spring somebody. And we're watching the guys trying to escape. So our SWAT team was there, and this, don't do this. It was violating safety rules, but because we were fully, locked and loaded, ready for bear. But we had one guy in particular. He was what we call a frequent flyer, and he was just mouthing us, talking about us and our kids and our family and all the stuff he was going to do to us. And he just kept running his mouth. So finally, a friend of mine who is now retired from the job, and it wasn't me, put the laser on his MP5 right in the middle of the guy's chest. And that was when lasers were kind of new. And the guy looks down and goes, "What the hell's that?" He said, "Where it glows is where it goes. You need to shut up." It worked in that situation.
Yeah. I think you're right. It's the rack the 870 and the all run away syndrome. And I know of a couple of situations, and one of them is, and there's actually, if you check YouTube, you can probably find it. It's a video, and it was a felony hot stop after a pursuit. And these were kind of bad guys, gang members been shooting out the car at the cops and all that kind of stuff. Well, they crash, and a whole bunch of cops pulled up. Well, this agency happened to have Beretta 92s with Crimson Trace grip lasers. Well, the interior of this car lit up with these lasers because it was nighttime. and it was very funny to watch because you see everybody's hands fly up in the air. Guns start getting thrown out of the car, and so I thought, well, that worked. It may not have worked, but I think something for people to realize is that you use your sights. There's primary number one, use your sights, and then use the laser as a tool. And if the something you really need to practice with though is that if you transition to a laser for some reason and the laser doesn't work for some reason, I have been there before in training and playing where you kind of go, huh? And there's a kind of a pregnant pause while you re-shift gears in your brain. It's like, oh wait, sights. That's right. Yeah. So
I've had it where the laser was working fine, but I managed to miss the button. And again, there's that pause for a second, and that's probably a training failure. It's not a failure of design or the light, but it's like, okay,
what do I do now? No. Yeah. Okay, but red or green? Red or green, boys.
Well, if you use green, you're definitely going to get killed on the street, and Miley Cyrus is going to lip sync at your funeral. So that's a fact. It's borne out by statistics and data.
Okay.
And because it said it on the internet, right?
Yeah. Or maybe I made it up. I don't know, but there's got to be some legitimacy. I don't know, but seriously, what do you guys like on that? Red or green?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
I prefer the green, but if I end up, and I've got both, it makes no matter to me. Again, I'm more vanilla. Whatever I'm equipped with, I want to be good with, and the rest of it can sort itself out.
It is true. There's a lot to be said for, shoot the gun you have in your hand. If you hand Robbie Latham a high 0.9 millimeter, he'll outshoot 99.99% of the people around him with $10,000 competition pistols.
Yeah.
So I think I would default to a green just because I'm older now and I can see the green a little easier, a little faster. It's a little brighter to me. But I know the early days of red lasers, they were weaker. It seems, you really did have to, even in dusky times outside, it was sometimes hard to see them after maybe 10 yards or so. But nowadays I notice, good Lord, I can shine a green laser out my office window here at a 15-yard steel target out there and see the dot. And it's like, holy cow, this is quite.
They've really changed. I mean,
yeah.
I don't really care either. I have some green, some red. I used to get all worked up about it, and like, in the conditions for which they're designed, meaning not really bright and sunny, anything less than that, I don't know. I see them both.
Now, if we're going to be a real magazine, though, we got to talk about IR and NVG because, of course, everybody's got that, right?
Yeah.
Let me go get my tactical gear on.
Yeah, we better tactical gear. I think in the real world, I'm sure the average Sam and Susie homemaker doesn't use IR lasers.
Probably not.
I mean, I've used them in some training situations, and it's great fun. I mean, it's amazing. And what I enjoy is I just enjoy sitting behind the firing line, wearing the goggles, and watching everyone on the line, all the lasers going back and forth. And then because they're invisible otherwise, it's pretty cool.
It's like Star Wars. It's really cool, but
it is like Star Wars. I don't know.
Well, guys, any closing thoughts?
Oh, gosh. If you have a laser, use it to train for trigger press first. Truly. That's what I think. I mean, it's such a powerful tool for that. And then beyond that, trust your iron sights. Lasers are backup.
My closing thought would be try it. Try it in less than bright conditions, and you might be surprised to find that for me, I'm speaking for me, it is an entirely subconscious thing. I don't sit there and think I'm going to use my irons or my laser. I see what I see and I use it. In a darker environment, when that laser is on, you're probably going to see it. In a less dark environment, you're going to see your sights. It's a very subconscious thing for me after, messing around with them for some time.
Well, and my closing thought is, regardless of which side you are on in this argument, make sure you get onto a forum and rant and rave and call the guys on the other side a whole sack of dirty, rotten SOBs. Exactly.
There you go.
And you're going to get killed. It's funny. Both sides are going to get killed. So I guess it's kind of existential, right? But
no one can survive this debate then.
Exactly.
Whichever you choose, you're dead. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. So
wow.
Maybe we all need to be a little bit more reasonable about our shooting stuff. I know it's a crazy thought.
It takes all the fun out of it.
Exactly. I hope you got some good information during our quick hit chat about lasers. And with that, we hope you're enjoying the Guns Magazine podcast. Please tell all your friends, even those rioting liberals. Guns Magazine is #1 in the business, and we're using our decades of friendships to bring you the most interesting chats in the gun world. If you've got questions, comments, or a guest you'd like to recommend for the show, please email me. That's editor@gunsmagazine.com. Make sure you don't miss out on anything by subscribing to us on your favorite podcast directory and YouTube. Of course, you can always listen and download our episodes at gunsmagazine.com, and while you're at it, don't forget to check out our sister publication, American Handgunner Magazine, at americanhandgunner.com. And finally, before we go, I'd like to remind you to check out our sponsor and friend, Kimber Firearms, at kimberamerica.com. That's it for this episode of the Guns Magazine podcast for the entire thundering herd at FMG Publications. I'm Guns Magazine editor Brent T. Now get out there and get shooting.